Hey guys, tonight we are going to explore the quiet, and often contradictory, inner world of the warrior. We're going to journey through history to understand the codes of conduct, the systems of ethics, and the vows of honor that have shaped soldiers and fighting classes across the globe. Imagine the silent discipline of a Spartan phalanx before a battle, the solemn ritual of a samurai cleaning his sword, the weight of a medieval knight's vow to protect the innocent. Let's be honest, living up to these codes, where a single misstep could mean death or dishonor, is a level of pressure you'd probably rather just hear about as you drift off to sleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference for the channel. And feel free to post your location and local time in the comments. It's always amazing to see where everyone is listening from as we start this journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a dusty plain under a hot, Mediterranean sun. Before you is a line of men, standing so still they might be statues. They are warriors, their bodies honed by a lifetime of training, their bronze helmets gleaming, their long spears held perfectly vertical. They are the hoplites of ancient Sparta, and they are preparing for battle. But there is no shouting, no boasting, no wild, aggressive posturing. There is only a deep, collective, and unnerving silence. This silence is the first clue, the first hint of the powerful, unseen force that governs their every action. This is a warrior code made manifest. It seems like a paradox, doesn't it? The act of warfare is, by its very nature, about chaos, violence, and destruction. Why, then, have so many different cultures, across so many different centuries, felt the need to create elaborate rules, ethical systems, and codes of honor to regulate it? Why place rules on the most lawless of all human activities? The answer is as complex as it is fascinating. A warrior code serves many functions. First, and perhaps most importantly, it creates a sense of identity and group cohesion. It turns a simple group of armed men into a brotherhood. A shared code of conduct builds trust, ensuring that the warrior standing next to you in the shield wall will not break and run, because he is bound by the same vows of courage and loyalty as you are. His honor and your survival are intrinsically linked. Second, a code can, paradoxically, work to control and limit violence. It defines who is a legitimate target, an enemy warrior, and who is not. It sets the rules of engagement, of surrender, and of the treatment of prisoners. It channels the immense aggression of the trained warrior, giving it a framework and a purpose, preventing it from spilling over into pure, indiscriminate slaughter. And finally, a warrior code gives meaning, not just to the warrior's life, but more importantly, to their death. In a profession where death is a constant possibility, the code provides a path to a good death. To die bravely, to die honorably, to die while upholding the code, is to transform a simple, biological end into a transcendent act of sacrifice and glory. It ensures that the warrior will be remembered not as a casualty, but as a hero. You look again at the line of Spartans. Their discipline is legendary, a product of the agoge, the brutal, lifelong training system that we will explore later. But for now, you notice one thing in particular: their shields. The Spartan shield, or aspis, was a large, heavy, concave disc of wood and bronze. It was the single most important piece of their equipment, and the symbol of their entire code. You recall the famous saying of Spartan mothers to their sons as they went off to war: "Return with your shield, or on it." The meaning is simple and profound. To come home with your shield meant you had been victorious. To be carried home upon your shield meant you had died honorably in the line, your body recovered by your comrades. But to come home without your shield meant only one thing: that you had dropped its heavy weight in order to flee the battle more easily. And this was the ultimate act of disgrace. Why? Because a Spartan's shield did not just protect him. In the tight formation of the phalanx, the left half of your shield protected your own body, while the right half protected the unshielded left side of the man standing next to you. To drop your shield was to save yourself at the expense of your brother in arms. It was a selfish act that broke the integrity of the shield wall and endangered everyone. It was a betrayal of the code. You see them performing a strange, quiet ritual. Some of the men are combing their long, dark hair, carefully arranging it before putting on their helmets. To an outsider, like the historian Herodotus who first described it, this seemed like an act of incredible vanity, a preening before slaughter. But for the Spartans, it was a solemn, ritual act. It was a way of beautifying themselves for the possibility of a noble death. of facing their ultimate fate with a kind of calm and ordered grace. Historians and sociologists still argue whether warrior codes are primarily a civilizing force that restrains the natural brutality of warfare, or if they are a glorifying force that actually encourages violence by framing it as a noble path to glory. Looking at the quiet, deadly professionalism of the Spartans, it seems to be a complex mixture of both. Their code makes them more effective, more disciplined, and more terrifying killers. But it also binds them together, gives their lives a singular purpose, and provides them with a clear path to an honorable end. The silent, disciplined line of bronze and red begins to move forward, their steps perfectly in time, a single, living, killing machine. The image of their quiet resolve, their shared commitment to a code stricter than any law, will be our starting point. We have seen one powerful example of how a set of rules can shape a warrior class. Now, our journey will take us to other lands, other times, and other cultures, to see the many different and fascinating ways that societies all over the world have grappled with the same fundamental question: how does one live, fight, and die, with honor? The image of the disciplined, silent Spartans, marching as one unified body, fades into the dust of ancient Greece. Our journey continues, leaping across centuries and continents, carried on a different wind. The hot, dry air of the Mediterranean is replaced by a cool, humid breeze that smells of damp earth, pine forests, and the faint, sweet scent of cherry blossoms. You find yourself on a narrow path winding through a landscape of sculpted rice paddies and misty mountains. In the distance, overlooking a small village of wooden houses, stands a formidable castle, its distinctive curved roofs rising in elegant tiers. You have arrived in feudal Japan, during the age of the samurai. A lone figure walks the path towards you. His posture is erect, his movements economical and precise. He wears the iconic armor of his class, a complex suit made not of steel plate, but of small, lacquered plates of leather and iron, intricately laced together with colorful silk cords. It is a work of art, designed to be both strong and flexible. At his left side, tucked into his sash, are two swords, one long and one short. This pair, the daisho, is the soul of the samurai, the visible symbol of his status and his readiness to use lethal force. His face is a mask of serene impassivity. He is a warrior, but there is no aggression in his demeanor, only a deep, abiding, and powerful calm. This calm is the product of his code, a philosophy known as Bushido, the way of the warrior. While the term Bushido itself was popularized long after the age of active samurai warfare, the principles it represents were the bedrock of the samurai's identity for centuries. It was a complex and demanding ethical system, a blend of Zen Buddhist serenity, Shinto reverence for nature and ancestors, and the practical Confucian ideals of social order. As you watch the silent warrior pass, you begin to contemplate the virtues that govern his life. The first is gi, which can be translated as rectitude or justice. It is the ability to see the right course of action and to follow it without wavering, to make decisions with a calm and rational mind, even in the face of chaos. For the samurai, this meant to strike when it was right to strike, but also, and perhaps more importantly, to die when it was right to die. It was a commitment to doing the right thing, regardless of the personal cost. The next virtue is yu, or courage. But this was not the blind, reckless bravado of a berserker. Bushido taught that courage must always be tempered by intelligence and caution. A famous samurai saying puts it this way: it is true courage to live when it is right to live, and to die only when it is right to die. To throw your life away needlessly was not brave, it was foolish. True courage was the ability to face fear, to master it, and to act with a clear head in the midst of terror. Intertwined with this strength was jin, the virtue of benevolence and mercy. A warrior, possessing immense power over life and death, was expected to wield that power with compassion. This benevolence extended not just to the weak and the innocent, but in some cases, even to a defeated enemy. This was the virtue that was meant to keep a warrior from becoming a mere brute. Perhaps the most visible tenet was rei, the principle of respect and politeness. The intricate and formal etiquette of samurai society was not just about good manners. It was an expression of respect for others, and more importantly, a demonstration of complete mastery over one's own emotions. A calm, courteous demeanor, even towards an enemy, showed that you were not ruled by your passions. And at the heart of it all was meio, or honor. A samurai's personal honor, his sense of his own dignity and worth, was his most precious possession. The fear of shame, of bringing dishonor upon himself, his family, or his lord, was often a far more powerful motivator than the fear of death itself. This deep consciousness of honor was tied to the virtue of chugi, absolute, unwavering loyalty. The samurai's primary duty was to his daimyo, his feudal lord. This bond of loyalty was the glue that held their entire feudal society together. But the most profound, and perhaps most alien, aspect of this code was the samurai's relationship with death. Influenced by Zen Buddhism, the warrior was encouraged to meditate on his own mortality, to accept that he was, in a sense, already dead. By living every day with this acceptance, he could free himself from the fear of death, allowing him to act with perfect serenity and decisiveness in moments of extreme danger. To cling to life was to be a coward. To accept death was to achieve true freedom. This acceptance led to the practice of seppuku, the ritual of suicide that allowed a samurai to die with his honor intact. If a samurai faced a great defeat, committed a grave error, or wished to protest a decision made by his lord, he could choose to take his own life in a highly formalized and courageous way. It was seen not as a surrender, but as a final, ultimate act of will, a way to erase a past shame and die on one's own terms. Historians, of course, debate how consistently this noble ideal of Bushido was actually practiced. Historical records are filled with tales of samurai who were just as treacherous, greedy, and brutal as warriors anywhere else. Was Bushido a lived reality for the majority of the samurai class, or was it a romanticized ideal, a kind of propaganda created to justify their privileged and violent position in society? The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the complex middle. You see a fundamental difference between this code and the one you witnessed in Sparta. The Spartan code was collective, focused on the discipline and survival of the group, the phalanx. Bushido, while built on a foundation of loyalty, feels intensely personal. It is about the individual warrior's inner state, his personal honor, his mastery of his own mind and his own death. The lone samurai has passed you now, his walk silent and purposeful. He stops beneath a cherry tree, its branches laden with pale pink blossoms. He looks up at them, and you know he is seeing a powerful symbol of his own existence. The cherry blossom is beautiful, it is noble, but its life is incredibly short, and it falls from the branch with a graceful, uncomplaining acceptance. You have just been introduced to a warrior code that is also a complete philosophy for both living and dying, a way of finding serenity in the very heart of a violent world. The image of the lone samurai, serene beneath the falling cherry blossoms, dissolves like a dream. We let the gentle sounds of his world fade and we travel once more, back across the globe and back through the centuries. The air grows cooler, damper, smelling of wet earth and green, rolling hills. You find yourself in the heartland of medieval Europe, perhaps in the verdant fields of France or England, sometime in the 12th century. A great stone castle dominates the nearby horizon, its banners fluttering in the breeze. This is the age of the knight, the age of chivalry. A figure on a powerful warhorse thunders past you. He is a vision of iron and strength. Unlike the samurai in his flexible lacquer and silk, this warrior is encased in a suit of mail, a dense, heavy mesh of thousands of interlocking iron rings. Over it, he wears a linen surcoat bearing his coat of arms. His head is protected by a heavy steel helmet, and in his hand, he carries a long, thick lance tipped with a deadly iron point. At his side hangs a heavy, broad-bladed sword, and on his arm is a large, kite-shaped shield. He is not a nimble warrior. He is a human fortress, a shock trooper whose primary purpose is to charge and shatter an enemy line. And this formidable creature of war is governed by one of the most famous, and most contradictory, codes in history, the Code of Chivalry. The word itself, chevalerie, comes from the Old French for horsemanship, and in its earliest form, the code was simply a practical set of rules for these elite, mounted warriors. It was about being a skilled and brave fighter, or prowess, and being loyal to the feudal lord who had granted you your land and your horse. But over time, influenced by the church and the culture of the royal courts, it blossomed into something far more complex and aspirational. You can think of the mature code of chivalry as having three main pillars, three distinct areas where a knight swore his duty. The first was his duty to his lord. This was the practical, military core of his existence. He was a vassal, and in exchange for his fief, his grant of land, he owed his lord a set number of days of military service each year. In battle, he was expected to fight with courage and to be unswervingly loyal, protecting his lord's life with his own. The second pillar was his duty to God. The medieval church, horrified by the constant, brutal warfare waged by the knightly class, made a concerted effort to tame these violent men. It instituted movements like the Peace and Truce of God, which attempted to forbid fighting on holy days, like Sundays and Lent. and forbade attacks on non-combatants like priests, women, and peasants. The church tried to rebrand the knight, to turn him from a simple feudal thug into a soldier of Christ, a warrior who would use his great strength not for personal gain, but in the service of justice and the protection of the faithful. But it is the third pillar of chivalry that is the most famous, the most romantic, and the most strange to our modern minds. This was the knight's duty to the ladies, and it gave rise to the elaborate and fascinating culture of courtly love. In the courts of southern France, poets and troubadours began to celebrate a new kind of romantic ideal. A knight would choose a noble lady, who was often the wife of his own lord, and pledge himself to her as her devoted, humble servant. He would wear her colors in tournaments, he would fight battles in her name, and he would write her poetry, praising her beauty and virtue. This love was typically a deeply emotional but unconsummated affair. It was a spiritual and romantic devotion that was meant to ennoble the knight, to inspire him to be a better man, to tame his rough, warlike nature by focusing it on the service of a beautiful and unattainable woman. These ideals, prowess in battle, loyalty to his lord, service to God, and devotion to his lady, formed the beautiful and glittering tapestry of chivalry. The tournament field was where this tapestry was put on public display. Here, in a controlled and festive environment, knights could demonstrate their skills in the joust, winning honor, fame, and sometimes great riches by defeating their opponents and claiming their horses and armor as ransom. It was a combination of brutal sport, military training, and high social drama. But there is a deep and troubling question that hangs over all of this. Historians have long debated the reality of chivalry. Was it a genuine ethical system that truly guided the behavior of medieval knights, or was it, as one historian famously put it, little more than lipstick on a gorilla, a beautiful, romantic veneer that served only to hide and justify the brutal violence of a parasitic warrior elite? The contradictions are stark. A knight like William Marshall, famously called the greatest knight that ever lived, could be the epitome of chivalric loyalty and prowess, yet he fought in bloody battles and tournaments with skill and ferocity. A knight could write a tender poem to his lady in the morning and lead a brutal sack of a peasant village in the afternoon, seeing no contradiction between the two acts. The code of chivalry, in practice, often applied only to interactions between members of the noble class. The vow to protect the weak often did not extend to the knight's own peasants, whom he could exploit without a second thought. Comparing this code to the Bushido of the samurai, you see a profound difference. Bushido was an intensely personal, inward-looking philosophy, focused on self-mastery, serenity, and an acceptance of death. Chivalry was a more public, outward-facing performance. It was about displaying your prowess in the tournament, demonstrating your piety through pilgrimage or crusading, and declaring your elaborate, poetic love for a noble woman. The samurai ideal was to have a calm heart. The knightly ideal was to perform great deeds. You watch the knight on his great horse as he rides towards the distant castle, his banner snapping in the wind, his armor gleaming in the sun. He is a magnificent and romantic figure, the hero of 1,000 tales. But you now understand the complex and often troubling reality that lies beneath the polished steel. The code of chivalry was a noble dream, a beautiful attempt to impose a framework of mercy, piety, and grace upon the violent heart of the medieval warrior. It was an aspiration that created great art and timeless legends, but it was a dream that very often shattered against the brutal, pragmatic, and unromantic reality of the world it was born from. The magnificent, gleaming figure of the chivalric knight, with his elaborate vows and romantic ideals, fades from view. His world, for all its brutality, was wrapped in a beautiful and comforting fiction. We leave this world of poetry and paradox and travel back once more to the hot, dusty plains of ancient Greece. We are returning to Sparta, but this time, we are not here to witness the warrior in his moment of glory before a battle. We are here to see how that warrior was made. We are here to witness the forging of a human weapon, through a lifelong system of training and indoctrination known as the agoge. You find yourself not on a battlefield, but in the city-state of Lacedaemon, what we call Sparta. But it does not look like a great city. The ancient historian Thucydides noted that if Sparta were ever abandoned, future generations would have a hard time believing how powerful it had been. There is no great acropolis like in Athens, no magnificent marble temples, no grand theaters. The city is austere, functional, and unadorned, more like a collection of villages than a capital. The Spartans famously boasted that their city's walls were not made of stone, but of the chests of their men. And the agoge was the furnace where those chests, and the hearts within them, were forged into something harder than stone. To understand this brutal system, You must first understand the single, all-consuming fear that drove Spartan society. The Spartans themselves, the full citizens known as the Spartiates, were a tiny minority. They were a small ruling class living on top of a vast, subjugated population of state-owned slaves known as the Helots. The Helots, tied to the land they worked, outnumbered their Spartan masters by as much as 10 to 1. They were a permanent, hostile, and resentful underclass, a constant threat of rebellion from within. The entire Spartan way of life, every law, every custom, every strange ritual, was designed with one singular purpose: to create a warrior elite so disciplined, so formidable, and so ruthless that they could perpetually suppress this massive internal threat. The agoge was not a school, it was a system of social control, born of fear. The indoctrination began at birth. When a Spartan baby was born, it was not immediately taken home. It was taken before a council of elders who inspected the infant for any sign of weakness or physical deformity. If the baby was deemed unfit, it was taken to a nearby chasm at the foot of Mount Gitos and left to die. This practice of exposure was not seen as cruel, it was a pragmatic necessity. The state could not afford to waste resources on raising a citizen who could not one day become a perfect soldier. If the child passed this first, brutal test, he was allowed to live with his mother until the age of 7. But at that tender age, his childhood ended. He was taken from his family and enrolled in the agoge. He was organized into a communal barracks, a sort of wolf pack or herd called an agel, with other boys his age. Here, he would live, eat, train, and sleep for the rest of his youth. The emotional bonds to his family were deliberately and systematically severed. His new family was his pack. His new father was the state. The training was relentless, a lifelong ordeal designed to strip away all softness and individuality. The boys were given only one thin cloak to wear, winter and summer, to accustom them to hardship. They were forced to go barefoot, to harden their feet for marching over the rough Greek terrain. They were intentionally and systematically underfed. This was not just to build their endurance for hunger, but to actively encourage them to steal food. Stealing taught them cunning, stealth, and daring. But if a boy was caught stealing, he was not punished for the theft, he was viciously whipped for the clumsiness of getting caught. Their days were filled with grueling physical exercise, running, wrestling, boxing, and endless military drills with spears and shields. But the psychological conditioning was perhaps even more intense. They were taught to endure any pain without complaint, to show no emotion, to speak only when necessary and with the fewest words possible, a trait that gives us our word laconic, from Laconia, the region of Sparta. As they grew older, the training grew more severe. In one infamous institution, the crypta, select young men were sent out into the countryside alone, with only a knife. They had to survive by their wits, sleeping during the day and moving at night, tasked with terrorizing the Helot population and even assassinating any Helot who seemed like a potential leader or troublemaker. It was a brutal final examination in the arts of stealth, survival, and killing. Historians, of course, must be cautious. Much of what we know about Sparta was written by non-Spartans, like the Athenian Xenophon or the later Roman writer Plutarch. There is a fierce debate about this Spartan mirage. Were these writers giving us a factual account of Spartan life, or were they creating a heavily idealized and sometimes exaggerated portrait of a perfect warrior society to critique the perceived softness of their own cultures? The system also shaped Spartan women, who, while not fighters, were essential to the code. They underwent their own public education and physical training, all with the goal of producing strong, healthy sons for the state. They were famously stoic, expected to show no grief if a son died honorably in battle. They were the guardians of the code at home, the ones who would tell their sons to return with your shield, or on it. The end product of this relentless, 23-year-long process was the warrior you saw in the first chapter. A man who was a perfect physical specimen, who felt no pain, who had no fear of death, and whose loyalty to the state and to the man next to him and the phalanx was absolute. He was a human cog, forged for the singular purpose of fitting into the great Spartan war machine. You see now how this code differs from the others we have witnessed. Bushido was a personal, philosophical quest for serenity. Chivalry was a romantic, outward performance of ideal virtues. The Spartan code was neither of these things. It was a brutally pragmatic, purely state-focused system. There was no poetry, no complex inner life, no mercy. There was only the state. There was only the shield wall. You watch as a 7-year-old boy, his face a small, stoic mask, turns away from his mother for the last time and walks towards the dark entrance of the barracks. The warrior is not born. In Sparta, he is systematically, painfully, and completely made. The image of the young Spartan boy, his face a stoic mask as he enters the dark barracks, fades from our view. We leave behind the rigid, state-controlled world of ancient Greece, a society where the individual was subsumed entirely by the needs of the collective. Our journey now takes us to a place where honor is just as important, but where the code is not written by the state, but is carried in the hearts of the people themselves. We travel forward through time and east across the globe, until the green hills of the Peloponnese are replaced by the high, rugged, and breathtaking mountains of Central Asia. You are in the tribal lands of the Pashtun people, a region of what is now modern Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the unwritten law of this land is called Pashtunwali. You find yourself in a landscape of harsh and unforgiving beauty. Immense, snow-capped peaks tear at the sky, and deep, narrow valleys wind between them. The villages here are not clusters of huts, but fortified compounds, kalas, with high mud brick walls, built for defense. This is a land that has resisted conquerors for millennia, from Alexander the Great to the great empires of the modern age. Its geography has bred a people who are fiercely independent, resilient, and deeply loyal to their own kin. And their code, Pashtunwali, is a reflection of this land and its people. It is not a warrior code in the same sense as the others we have seen. It is not just for a specific class of soldiers. It is the code for the entire Pashtun people, an ancient, pre-Islamic system of ethics and conduct that has been passed down orally from generation to generation. It governs everything, from how you treat a guest to how you respond to an insult, from family matters to tribal politics. And at its very core is the concept of nung, or honor. You walk towards one of the fortified villages, a stranger in a strange land. As you approach, a man with a weathered face and a magnificent beard, dressed in a simple tunic and waistcoat, steps out to meet you. He sees you are a traveler, alone and far from home. And he invites you into his home. This is your first lesson in Pashtunwali, and it is perhaps its most important tenet, melmastia, or hospitality. You are led into a simple courtyard, seated on a rug, and offered tea and bread. The hospitality shown to you is not just a matter of being polite. It is a sacred, absolute, and unconditional duty. It does not matter who you are, what your religion is, or where you come from. As a guest in this man's home, you are under his protection. He and his family would be expected to defend you with their own lives if necessary, even if they had just met you. Even a mortal enemy, if he were to request shelter, must be taken in and protected as a guest. It is a profound and powerful expression of human dignity in a harsh and often dangerous land. Closely related to this is the principle of Nanawati, or sanctuary. Any person, even a fugitive fleeing from justice, can approach a Pashtun and ask for asylum. To grant that asylum, to protect that person from their pursuers, is a sacred obligation. To refuse is to bring a deep and lasting shame, or sharm, upon oneself and one's family. But as you sit there, experiencing this incredible generosity, you become aware of the code's other, much harder, edge. This is the principle of badal, justice, which often translates as revenge. Just as hospitality is an absolute duty, so is the need to avenge a wrong. An insult, a theft, or a murder cannot go unanswered. To allow a slight against your honor or the honor of your family to pass is to be seen as weak and contemptible. This is not seen as simple vengeance, it is seen as the restoration of cosmic balance, of justice. This obligation can lead to blood feuds that last for generations, a cycle of violence where one act of revenge inevitably leads to another. The innkeeper of this system is the Jirga, a council of tribal elders. When a dispute arises, a Jirga is convened. These respected elders listen to both sides and then, based on the principles of Pashtunwali, they mediate a solution, their decision carrying the weight of ancient tradition. For centuries, this system of local, consensus-based justice has often been far more powerful and relevant to the people than any formal law imposed by a distant central government. You can now see the profound difference between this code and the others we have explored. The Spartans' loyalty was to the abstract idea of the state. The knights and the samurai's loyalty was to a feudal lord, a single man at the top of a pyramid. But the Pashtun's primary loyalty is to his kin, his family, his clan, his tribe. Pashtunwali is not an individualistic code. Your honor is not entirely your own. It is a shared commodity, a reflection of the honor of your entire family. Anthropologists and political scientists debate the role of Pashtunwali in the modern world. Is it a noble, ancient code of conduct that preserves social order and a fierce sense of identity in a difficult land? Or is it an anachronistic and rigid system whose emphasis on blood feuds and revenge contributes to the cycles of violence and instability that have plagued this region for so long? The answer, you suspect, is that it is both. As the evening draws on, you sit in the safety of your host's home, a guest protected by the sacred laws of Malmostia. You look out at the towering, moonlit mountains, and you can feel the immense weight of the code that governs this land. It is a complex and paradoxical system, capable of producing acts of breathtaking generosity and acts of unforgiving violence. It is a code that is not written in any book, but is etched into the very rocks of the mountains and into the proud, unyielding hearts of the people who call them home. You are sitting in the quiet courtyard of a Pashtun home, the high, rugged mountains standing as silent witnesses to a timeless code of honor. This feeling of an ancient, unwritten law, passed down through generations, begins to fade. We travel again, leaving the stark beauty of Central Asia behind, moving southeast, across the great plains of the Indian subcontinent. The air grows thick, warm, and humid, scented with spices and incense. You find yourself in a bustling city in ancient India, a world of vibrant color, teeming crowds, and a social structure of immense complexity and antiquity. Here, the warrior's code is not a matter of tribal custom, but of sacred, cosmic duty. You are here to learn of the Kshatriya Dharma. This society is ordered by a system known as Varna, or the caste system. At the top are the Brahmins, the priests and scholars who are the custodians of sacred knowledge. At the bottom are the Shudras, the laborers and servants. In between are the Vaishyas, the merchants and farmers, and just below the Brahmins are the Kshatriyas. The Kshatriyas are the traditional warrior, administrative, and ruling class. They are the arms and chest of society, their purpose to protect the people, to uphold justice, and to rule with strength and wisdom. To be born a Kshatriya is to be born with a specific and demanding set of responsibilities. The code that governs their life is their dharma. This is one of the most profound and important concepts in Hindu thought, and it is much more than just a code of conduct. Dharma can mean righteousness, cosmic law, virtue, duty, or the right way of living. It is the underlying order that holds the entire universe together. But this order is not the same for everyone. Every person has their own svadharma, their own personal duty, which is determined by their caste and their stage of life. The dharma of a priest is to study and teach the sacred texts. The dharma of a merchant is to create wealth for the community. And the sacred dharma of a Kshatriya is to fight. This is the source of the Kshatriya's greatest moral dilemma. How can it be a sacred duty to engage in violence, to kill, when the general principle of dharma is to cause no harm? This conflict lies at the very heart of the warrior's path, and it is most famously explored in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most beloved and important texts in Hinduism. To understand this conflict, you are transported to the legendary battlefield of Kurukshetra. Two great armies, composed of the finest warriors of the age, are arrayed against each other, their banners snapping in the hot wind, the air ringing with the sound of trumpeting elephants and the blowing of conch shells. A great, catastrophic war between two families of cousins is about to begin. In a chariot at the head of one of the armies sits the great warrior Arjuna, the finest archer in the world, a perfect example of the Kshatriya class. His charioteer is his friend and mentor, Krishna. But as Arjuna looks out across the battlefield at the enemy army, he does not see anonymous foes. He sees his own family. He sees his great-grandfather, his revered teachers, his uncles, his cousins, his friends. And his heart breaks. He is overcome with grief and despair. His mighty bow slips from his hand. He slumps down in his chariot and tells Krishna that he cannot fight. "How can I kill my own kinsman?" he asks. "What victory is worth this slaughter? It is a terrible sin. It is better for me to be killed, unarmed and unresisting, than to participate in this." Arjuna is having a complete moral and nervous breakdown. The duty of his warrior caste has come into direct, violent conflict with his love for his family and his basic human desire not to kill. It is at this moment that Krishna reveals his true, divine form. He is an incarnation of the great god Vishnu, the preserver of the universe. And the rest of the Bhagavad Gita consists of Krishna's divine counsel to the despairing warrior. Krishna explains that Arjuna's personal feelings of grief and attachment, while understandable, are an illusion. He must look beyond them to his sacred duty, his dharma. As a Kshatriya, his purpose on this earth is to fight in a righteous war to restore order and justice. To abandon his duty now, To walk away from the battle because of his personal feelings would be the greater sin. It would be an act of cowardice that would bring him dishonor, and it would lead to the victory of chaos and injustice, disrupting the dharma of the entire world. Krishna teaches Arjuna the path of karma yoga, the path of selfless action. He must fight, he must fulfill his duty, but he must do so without any attachment to the fruits of his actions. He should not be motivated by a desire for victory, or glory, or wealth. He should not be deterred by the fear of death or the sorrow of killing. He must simply act because it is his duty to act, offering up his actions to God, and remaining internally detached from the outcome. Philosophers have debated the message of the Gita for centuries. Is it a justification for violence and a rigid adherence to one's caste duty? Or is it a profound and subtle allegory for the internal battlefield that exists within every human soul, the constant struggle between our own selfish desires and fears, and our duty to a higher purpose? You see how this code differs from the others. Pashtunwali was a code of the tribe. Chivalry was a code of a social class. The Spartan agoge was a code of the state. The Kshatriya dharma is a code of the cosmos. To fail in your duty is not just a personal dishonor or a betrayal of your lord, it is an act that disrupts the very fabric of the universal order. To be a warrior, in this view, is not a path to glory, but a sacred, and often deeply painful, responsibility. One might even see echoes of this in rituals like the Ashvamedh, the great horse sacrifice, a complex rite that a king would undertake to prove his sovereignty, an act that was as much a religious and cosmic statement as it was a military one. Back on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the long dialogue is over. Arjuna, his doubts erased, his heart now calm and resolute, picks up his great bow. He has accepted his dharma. He is ready to fight. You are left to contemplate this profound and challenging warrior code, one that does not ignore the moral horror of violence, but instead contextualizes it within a vast framework of cosmic duty and spiritual detachment. The warrior's path is not one of glory, but one of necessity. The image of the warrior Arjuna, his face calm and resolute as he accepts his cosmic duty on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, dissolves into the Indian heat haze. The complex, philosophical world of Dharma fades away, and we are once again traveling, moving north and west, across the vastness of time and space. The hot, humid air grows cold, sharp, and salty. The scent of spice and incense is replaced by the smell of pine, brine, and wet wool. You find yourself on the heaving, gray waters of the North Sea, the spray from the waves cold on your face. You are on a longship, a magnificent, dragon-headed vessel, its single square sail bellying in the wind. You have arrived in the world of the Norsemen, the Vikings, sometime in the 9th century. You look around at the crew of this vessel. These are not the uniformed, disciplined soldiers of Sparta, nor the serene, aristocratic samurai. These are free men, farmers, traders, and adventurers, their faces weathered by the harsh sun and sea salt, their beards braided. They are dressed in practical, hard-wearing wool and leather, some with a shirt of mail, others with only a thick leather jerkin for protection. They carry round wooden shields, painted with bold designs, long spears, and their most prized possessions, a heavy, sharp-bladed axe or a fine, pattern-welded sword. They are a war party, bound together not by law, but by a sworn oath of loyalty to the chieftain, the Jarl, who stands at the tiller, his eyes fixed on the misty horizon. The code that governs these men is not written in any book of philosophy, it is a raw, pragmatic, and powerful code of personal honor. The ideal they aspire to is to be known as a drinker, a man of worth and valor. At the very heart of the Viking worldview is a concept that is more important than gold, more important than land, and even more important than life itself. It is a man's reputation, his domsworth, or word of judgment, what people say of him after he is dead. In the great collection of Norse wisdom poems known as the Hovmal, there is a famous verse that perfectly captures this belief. Cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself will also die, it says, but the word of fame will never die, for him who is a good one. Wealth could be lost, family could pass away, but a good name, earned through great deeds, was the only true immortality a man could achieve. Every part of their code was built upon this foundation. Courage in the face of overwhelming odds was essential. To be branded a Nivingr, a coward, was the ultimate shame, a social death far worse than a physical one. Loyalty to one's chieftain was also absolute. The Jarl was expected to be a great ring giver, a man who generously distributed the spoils of a raid, the silver arm rings, the fine weapons, the gold, among his warriors. In return, his men, his personal retinue known as the herd, owed him their swords and their lives. They were expected to fight to the death to defend him, for his glory and his reputation were a direct reflection of their own. But this was a practical code for a hard world. While boasting around the campfire was a common pastime, a man's words had to be backed up by his actions. A warrior who boasted of his bravery but shirked from the shield wall was an object of contempt and ridicule. Your worth was not what you said it was what your peers, the other free men on this bench, said it was. This obsession with reputation shaped their entire view of life and death. The ideal death was not a peaceful one in old age, surrounded by family. The ideal death was a glorious one, in the heat of battle. This was the only sure way to reach the warrior's paradise, Valhalla. It was not a heaven open to all. It was the hall of the slain, a great, raucous mead hall in Asgard, the realm of the gods, where only the souls of the bravest warriors who died in combat were permitted to enter. It was believed that the Valkyries, the supernatural warrior maidens of the god Odin, would fly over the battlefield, choose the most heroic of the slain, and escort them to Valhalla's gates. There, they would spend their afterlife feasting, drinking, and fighting every day, honing their skills until the end of time, when they would be called upon to fight alongside the gods in the final, apocalyptic battle of Ragnarok. This belief transformed the terror of a violent death into the ultimate career goal. You look at the men on the ship. Some are talking and laughing, others are quietly sharpening the edge of an axe with a whetstone. Some are the famed berserkers, champions who were said to be able to enter a trance like battle fury, howling like wolves and biting the edges of their shields, seemingly immune to pain. Whether this was a form of ritual magic, a psychological state, or simply a terrifying story to frighten their enemies, it represented the ultimate expression of Viking warrior rage. Historians debate the primary driver for the Viking Age. Was it land scarcity in their Scandinavian homelands, or was it, as many now believe, primarily a quest for portable wealth and, most importantly, for the fame and reputation that came with it? Looking at the grim, excited anticipation on the faces of these men as their longship cuts through the grey water, you sense that the stories that will be told of their deeds are just as important as the silver they hope to gain. This warrior code is a stark contrast to the others we have seen. It lacks the deep philosophical introspection of Bushido. It lacks the complex religious and courtly rules of chivalry. And it lacks the all-encompassing state control of the Spartan agoge. It is a raw, personal, and peer-based system of honor. It is the code of the ambitious entrepreneur as much as the soldier. The misty coastline of what is perhaps England or France looms larger on the horizon. The men on the ship begin to stir, picking up their shields, checking their helmets. The time for talk is over, and the time for action is near. You understand now what drives them. They are not fighting for a god, or for a king, or for a sophisticated ethical system. They are fighting for their story. They are fighting for a name that will be remembered with honor around the long fires of their homeland, a name that will outlive their own brief, violent, and glorious lives. The grey, cold waves of the North Sea crash against the side of the Viking longship and then dissolve into mist. Our journey takes a dramatic leap, across a vast ocean and into a different hemisphere. The chill in the air is replaced by a thick, humid heat that smells of tropical flowers, damp earth, and the smoke from thousands of cooking fires. You are in the heart of the Aztec Empire, in the magnificent island city of Tenochtitlan, sometime in the late 15th century. This is a world of breathtaking beauty and brutal, sacred violence, governed by a warrior code utterly alien to any we have seen before. The city itself is an engineering marvel, a vast metropolis built on an island in the middle of a lake, connected to the mainland by long, stone causeways. Canals serve as streets, plied by thousands of canoes. In the center of the city, the Great Temple, a massive, twin-peaked, stepped pyramid, rises towards the sky, a man-made mountain dedicated to the gods. This is a civilization at the height of its power, and that power is maintained by its formidable warrior societies. You see them in the marketplace, their presence commanding immediate respect. They are the elite, the veterans of dozens of battles. They are the Eagle Warriors and the Jaguar Warriors. Their appearance is stunning. The Eagle Warriors wear spectacular costumes made from the feathers of their sacred bird, their heads covered by elaborate helmets carved to look like the head of an eagle, with the warrior's own fierce face peering out from the open beak. The Jaguar Warriors are draped in the spotted pelts of the jaguar, the most powerful predator of the jungle, their own faces framed by the animal's snarling, fanged jaws. These men are not born into a noble class, they are commoners who have achieved their high status through one thing only: their courage and success on the battlefield. But success, for an Aztec warrior, was measured by a standard that would have been baffling to a Spartan, a samurai, or a Viking. For them, the primary goal in battle was not to kill the enemy. In fact, killing an opponent on the battlefield was often seen as a clumsy, inefficient, and somewhat wasteful act. The highest honor, the only path to advancement and glory, was to capture an enemy warrior alive and, if possible, unharmed. The reason for this strange objective lies at the very heart of Aztec cosmology. The Aztec gods, particularly the powerful sun god and god of war, Huitzilopochtli, were not sustained by prayers and simple offerings. They were sustained by human life itself. They believed that the universe was in a constant, precarious balance, and that the sun would cease to rise each morning if it was not nourished with the most precious substance imaginable, the human heart. The captured warriors were not to be enslaved or held for ransom. They were the sacred food of the gods. This belief gave rise to a unique form of conflict known as the Xochitl, or the Flowery War. These were not wars of conquest. They were prearranged, ritualized battles fought between the Aztecs and their traditional enemies, like the powerful city-state of Tlaxcala. The time and place of the battle would be agreed upon beforehand. The objective for both sides was not to gain territory, but simply to fight with honor and to take as many high-quality captives as possible for future religious sacrifices. It was war as a sacred, necessary, and recurring cosmic ritual. The Aztec warrior's weapon of choice was a perfect reflection of this goal. He did not carry a steel sword designed for piercing and killing. He wielded a macuahuitl, a weapon that looked like a heavy wooden paddle or club, edged with rows of razor-sharp blades of obsidian, or volcanic glass. It was a terrifying weapon, capable of inflicting horrific injuries, but it was designed primarily to maim, to disable, and to club an opponent into submission so that he could be captured, not to kill him cleanly. And what of the captive's fate? To our modern sensibilities, it seems like a pure horror. But in the Aztec worldview, to be chosen for sacrifice was the most noble and honorable death a warrior could hope for. The captive was often treated with great respect in the days leading up to the ceremony, dressed in the fine clothes of the god he was to be sacrificed to. When he was led up the steep steps of the great temple, he was participating in a sacred act of cosmic importance. His death was not an end, it was a transformation that guaranteed the survival of the universe, and it secured him a glorious afterlife. This was the concept of the flowery death. Any warrior who died in this way, either on the battlefield or on the sacrificial stone, was believed to travel to a special warrior's paradise. For 4 years, his soul would have the honor of accompanying the sun on its daily journey across the sky, from sunrise to noon. After that, his soul would be reincarnated as a beautiful hummingbird or a butterfly, destined to live forever among the flowers, sipping nectar for all eternity. Anthropologists debate the primary motivation for this system. Was it a purely religious conviction, a society locked in a genuine, terrifying belief that the world would end if the sacrifices stopped? Or did it also serve a brutal political purpose, a form of state-sponsored terror designed to intimidate and control the other peoples of the Valley of Mexico? The answer is likely a complex mix of both. You see how profoundly this code differs from the others. A Viking sought a glorious death in battle to prove his own worth and earn his place in Valhalla. An Aztec warrior sought to give a glorious death to his enemy on the altar, and in doing so, earn his own place in a flowery paradise. The ultimate act of courage was not taking a life, but taking a captive. The afternoon sun beats down on the stone causeways of Tenochtitlan. You see a young jaguar warrior, his spotted pelt draped over his shoulders, walking with a proud and steady gait. He is not carrying a bloody trophy. He is escorting a captive warrior from a recent flowery war. There is no sign of hatred between them. There is a strange, shared understanding. Both men are fulfilling their sacred duty, their dharma, playing their designated part in the great, violent, and beautiful drama that keeps their world turning. The great stone pyramids of Tenochtitlan, with their dark and bloody rituals, dissolve into the humid air. Our journey takes us north, leaving the dense, complex world of the Aztec Empire behind. We travel across the continent and forward in time, into the 18th century. The sky opens up, becoming a vast, endless dome of blue. The landscape transforms into a sea of grass that stretches to every horizon, a rolling ocean of green and gold, broken only by the distant, shadowy herds of grazing bison. You have arrived on the Great Plains of North America, the home of the nomadic horse tribes of the Lakota, the Cheyenne, and the Crow. Here, you will discover a warrior code where honor is measured not in kills, but in an act of supreme and audacious bravery. You see a group of warriors on horseback, their skill in the saddle so complete that man and animal seem to be a single being. This culture has been revolutionized by the arrival of the horse, which transformed these peoples into the finest light cavalry in the world. The warriors are decorated for battle. Their faces are painted with symbolic designs. Eagle feathers, each one representing a specific, recognized deed of honor, are tied into their long hair. They carry a round shield made of tough, shrunken buffalo hide, painted with sacred symbols that have come to them in a vision, offering spiritual protection. Their weapons are a bow, a quiver of arrows, and a long, stone-tipped lance. They are hunters, providers, and the protectors of their people, and their entire lives are governed by a complex and beautiful system of honor. Warfare between the Plains tribes was a constant feature of their lives. It was a cycle of raids and counter-raids, usually for horses, territory, or revenge. But for the Plains warrior, the goal of combat was often very different from that of the other warriors we have met. The highest honor, the most prestigious and celebrated act a warrior could perform, was not to kill his enemy. It was to count coup. The word coup comes from the French word for a strike or a blow. And that is precisely what it was. To count coup is to get so close to a living, armed enemy that you could touch him with your hand, with your bow, or with a special, purpose-built coup stick, and then ride away unharmed. It was an act of almost unbelievable bravery, skill, and contemptuous daring. To charge a man who is actively trying to kill you, to get within arm's reach, to simply touch him and turn away, was considered the ultimate demonstration of a warrior's power and fearlessness. This act was the pinnacle of a complex, unwritten hierarchy of honors. Touching a living enemy was the greatest coup. The second greatest might be to touch him at the very moment he was killed by another warrior. Stealing a prize horse from the middle of an enemy's camp was another deed of immense prestige. Taking an enemy's weapon or his shield in hand-to-hand combat was also a high honor. Killing an enemy was, of course, a notable and respectable deed, but it often ranked lower on the scale of glory than a successful, non-lethal coup. Why would a warrior society prize an act of touching over an act of killing? One reason was practical. In these relatively small, nomadic societies, every warrior was a valuable hunter and provider. A code that encouraged demonstrations of bravery rather than a fight to the death helped to minimize casualties and preserve the strength of the tribe. But the primary reason was philosophical. It took far more skill, speed, and spiritual power, what they might call medicine, to successfully count coup on a dangerous enemy than it did to simply shoot him from a distance with an arrow. It was the ultimate test. A warrior's standing within the tribe was a direct result of the coups he had successfully counted. After a raid, the warriors would gather before the entire village, and one by one, they would publicly recount their deeds in a formal ceremony. A warrior would strike a pole or a post with his coup stick and declare, "I touched the first enemy, and I am alive to tell of it." His claim had to be verified by the other warriors who had witnessed the act. A man's honor depended on this public recognition by his peers. To be caught lying or exaggerating one's deeds was a source of profound and lasting shame. The feathers a warrior wore were not mere decoration, they were his resume, a visible record of his courage, each one marking a specific, witnessed, and acknowledged coup. The coup stick itself was a fascinating object. It was not a weapon. It was a long, slender staff, often decorated with intricate beadwork, eagle feathers, and strips of fur. Its only purpose was for the sacred act of touching an enemy. To carry this into battle instead of a more deadly weapon was a statement of supreme self-confidence. Anthropologists debate the history of this unique warrior code. Was this focus on ritualized, low-casualty warfare the historical norm for these tribes? Or did it become more elaborate and widespread after the introduction of the horse in the 17th and 18th centuries? The horse made the lightning-fast raids and individual displays of equestrian skill that are central to counting coup much more feasible. You see how this code stands in contrast to the others. The Aztec warrior captured his enemy to serve a cosmic, religious purpose. The Viking sought death in battle to earn his own glorious afterlife. The Plains warrior sought to risk death in the most daring way possible in order to enhance his prestige and reputation here, in the world of the living. His goal was not to take a life, but to demonstrate his spiritual power by coming face to face with death and gracefully dancing away from it. You watch as a young warrior, his face painted, his best horse restless beneath him, prepares to join a raiding party. He holds his coup stick, its feathers fluttering in the prairie wind. He is not filled with a grim resolve for killing. He is filled with a nervous, excited energy. He is about to enter into a sacred and dangerous game, a deadly dance of honor where the greatest prize is not his enemy's life, but a simple touch, a story that he can tell his people, and a new feather to wear in his hair. You are left to contemplate a warrior code where the highest form of courage is found not in the act of killing, but in the sublime and audacious art of the near miss. The image of the young plains warrior, his face painted for a dance with danger rather than a fight to the death, fades into the vast, open sky of the American prairie. His unique code, one that prized the audacity of bravery over the act of killing, is the last stop on our long journey. We have traveled across continents and through millennia, visiting the training grounds, battlefields, and council fires of some of history's most formidable warrior cultures. Now, we return to the present, to our own quiet space, to reflect on the echoes of these ancient codes. We began with the silent, disciplined Spartans, their entire lives dedicated to the strength of their shield wall. We traveled to feudal Japan and sat with the serene samurai, who contemplated the falling cherry blossoms and sought to master not just his sword, but his own mind and his own death. We saw the gleaming, contradictory knight of medieval Europe, sworn to God and his lady, his code a beautiful and often unachievable dream of honor. We returned to Sparta to witness the agoge, the brutal furnace that forged poison to human weapons for the state. We sat as protected guests in the high mountains of Afghanistan, learning the Pashtunwali's absolute laws of hospitality and revenge. We stood on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and felt the immense, cosmic weight of the Kshatriya's dharma. We sailed the grey seas with the Vikings, who fought and died for a good name that would outlive them. We saw the Aztec warrior, who sought a flowery death for his captives to feed the gods. And we rode over the Great Plains, where honor was found in a simple, daring touch. On the surface, these codes are a world apart, born from vastly different cultures, landscapes, and beliefs. But beneath their unique rituals and diverse virtues, they all sought to answer the same fundamental, paradoxical questions. In a world of violence and chaos, how do you create order? How do you forge a bond of absolute trust between people whose profession is killing? And most importantly, how do you give meaning to a life of conflict and a death that is so often brutal and premature? The code was the answer. It provided a framework for violence, a purpose for sacrifice, and an identity for the warrior himself. To be a samurai was to follow Bushido. To be a Spartan was to be a graduate of the agoge. The code was not just a set of rules they followed, it was the very definition of who they were. And though the worlds that created these codes have long since vanished, their echoes still resonate in our own time. The formal codes of conduct that govern modern militaries, like the Geneva Conventions or the Uniform Code of Military Justice, are the direct, legalistic descendants of this ancient impulse to regulate warfare, to define who can be targeted, and to hold warriors to a higher standard of behavior. The modern military concept of esprit de corps, the unbreakable bond between soldiers and a unit, is the same force that held the Spartan phalanx together and motivated a Viking's loyalty to his jarl. The creed of no man left behind is a modern expression of that ancient, sacred trust. We even see faint ghosts of these codes in the world of sports. The ideal of sportsmanship, of respecting your opponent, of playing the game with honor, and of winning or losing with grace, is a sanitized echo of the knightly tournament, a place where one's conduct was as important as one's victory. The modern fascination with historical martial arts, or the way business executives read books on Bushido for management strategies, shows how deeply these systems of honor continue to appeal to us. Of course, the world has changed. The warrior's role is different now. Sociologists and philosophers debate whether a truly personal, ethical code can even exist in an age of long-distance, impersonal warfare. Can the idea of chivalry have any meaning when the enemy is a blip on a radar screen and the decision to strike is made thousands of miles away? Perhaps not in the same way. And yet, the fundamental human needs that gave rise to these codes persist. The need to belong to a brotherhood, the need to believe you are fighting for a just cause, the need to find honor and purpose in the face of danger and death. These are timeless. The ancient codes we have explored are more than just historical curiosities. They are a vast and varied testament to humanity's long, noble, and often tragic struggle to find a moral path through the most immoral of circumstances, to find a measure of grace in a violent world. The long journey is over now, and the ghosts of these ancient warriors can finally be laid to rest. The image of the samurai, the knight, and the Spartan can dissolve, their armor and their weapons fading into the quiet stillness of your mind. The sounds of battle, the clash of steel, the shouts of victory and despair, all recede into a deep and profound silence. The immense pressure of their codes, the weight of their honor and their duty, can be lifted from your shoulders. Your own battles for the day are done. You have earned your rest. There are no more vows to keep, no more enemies to face. There is only the gentle comfort of your bed, the soft weight of your blanket, and the effortless peace of your own slow, steady breathing. You can let go of the stories, and allow yourself to drift into the deep, honorable, and well-deserved peace of a dreamless sleep.
dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh. Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó không có rõ đâu, không quay nó không có rõ. Nói xịn kìa chứ nói này quay đâu.
Thì chớp nhán nhán được rồi. tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó có đỏ đâu, không quay không có đỏ. Má xịn kìa, chứ nói này rồi đâu.
Thì chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó
chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi.